This incredible story was told to me by a lovely woman who served as a military doctor in the Red Army during World War II. She was ready to meet the enemy, the German invaders, but she had no idea who she would have to meet. I suggest you listen to her story from the first person.
It happened in October of the 41st. We were still in retreat. I had the rank of third-rank military doctor. That meant one sleeper on the buttonhole and corresponded to the rank of army captain. This system lasted until the 43rd, when epaulettes were introduced, and we began to be called differently, captain of the medical service, major, and so on. Only the epaulettes of the medics were narrower than the others. But that's probably not interesting, is it? The order then was that commanders had to be on duty at the division command post. I don't remember what was written about it in the regulations, but it's probably not interesting either. I just want to explain why I was at the division command post that day. I was on duty in my shift. After having been on duty, I returned to the infirmary at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. From the command post to the infirmary, to the outskirts of the village, was about 5 kilometres and a bit. The road was one, not winding, so it was impossible to get lost. There was sparse forest on the right and swamp on the left. It was October, as I said, but the weather was warm and clear. I emphasise on purpose, everything happened at 1 o'clock in the afternoon with a clear sky. It still... Well, not that it doesn't give me peace, but it seems wrong to me. It always seemed to me that if such things really happen, then they're supposed to appear after midnight at dusk. It's written so much about it. Is that supposed to happen? I was about 1 kilometre away from the command post when I heard a car behind me, and soon it caught up with me. It was an ordinary Gaz 64 with high cross-country ability, which we called Goat. At that time, we had never seen Willis. They started to arrive later. I stepped off the track to the side of the road. The track was narrow. The car stopped. There was only the driver in it, I remember perfectly well, with triangles in his buttonholes and infantry emblems. Exactly how many triangles there were, I didn't look closely. Face. Ordinary, you know. Typical, as they say, simple Slavic face. The sort of, how shall I put it, of the merrymakers and jesters. Not the first guy in the village, just cheerful and unpretentious. By the way, it is curious, though it has nothing to do with that story. It was the guys with such faces who turned out to be real heroes and tricksters with equal success. But that has nothing to do with that story. In general, his face was simple, typical, friendly. He had a good white-toothed smile, and all his teeth were healthy, white, perfect, even if you could bite through barbed wire. I guess I paid attention to teeth purely professionally at that time. We had dentistry and basics at the faculty. Here. He smiled so openly, carefree, and asked in a completely relaxed manner,
In the location, doctor?
I didn't remember him, but I thought he might have seen me somewhere before, or simply showed soldiers' ingenuity. He knew that in the village on the outskirts there was a medical unit, and where else should a doctor go but there? My buttonholes were, of course, medical. A single trowel is no longer a military feldsher, it's already a doctor, that is, a military doctor. I answered. Not that I nodded, I shrugged my shoulders uncertainly. Still, it was a military secret, the location of a separate military unit, i.e. a medical unit. At that time, secrecy was strict, all ears were buzzing, and there were grounds for it. You can't write everything off on time and spying. What is there to go far? My girls once had to bandage a real saboteur, a German, not a Russian traitor. His arm was shot through by the special agents when they took him. The chauffeur nodded with an understanding look, then said,
Sit down, doctor. We'll bring you back in the best way.
Or did he say something else? In general, he said some banality, but not vulgarity, no, some banal joke. We'll deliver you in the best way, we'll drive you with a breeze. I was going to sit down with him, not really thinking about it. I didn't want to walk that far, and I had no suspicions about him. He could not take me somewhere in the wrong direction. The road, I repeat, was one and only, stretching along the swamp. The German reconnaissance groups that came from that side to capture the tongue behaved differently. None of them would drive a car alone in broad daylight. I served for almost a year. I was shot at in the truest sense. I had a TT pistol in my holster. In short, no danger. And I would have just sat there. You know what stopped me? The laces. Hooks are 2 leather loops on which the holster hangs from the belt. On one of them I had a seam split. I noticed it long ago, but I didn't get round to fixing it. And just when I stepped to the car, the seam split completely. The holster suddenly sagged on one loop, and at the first second it seemed that the holster had torn off and was falling. I grabbed it, purely automatically, and looked at the belt. And, as it happened, I saw the driver from a distance out of the corner of my eye, from the side. It was a completely different person. Perhaps not a man at all. His pupils were vertical like a cat's. You don't see that in a human being. And his teeth were different. Not fangs, no, but I can't explain to you clearly what was strange, but at that moment it became quite clear to me that his teeth were not the same, not human, and there was something wrong with his face. Everything was in place, but the proportions were all wrong. The facial angle, the jaws, the nose, everything was wrong. He was ruddy and cheeky, but now he looks like a skull covered in a kind of skin, yellowish, dry, not boring human skin, but a kind of skin. It was a creature, that's what I realised instantly. And I couldn't explain it better, even today after all these years. Not a human being at all, an alien, incomprehensible thing. I flinched instantly away. Some instinct kicked in. I grabbed the holster, and without hesitation, again instinctively, started to pull the valve, and the strap, as it happens, jammed. And I saw him now, as if he were the same, but not quite. He seemed to be the same old unpretentious boy, but there was something peeping through the old face, the same thing I'd seen out of the corner of my eye. He must have recognised it, almost instantly. Realised I was onto him. His face contorted in a very unhuman way, and he hissed something like,
"Shh, you."
I'll never be able to replicate that tone in my life. It wasn't a human voice, but it wasn't an animal sound either. It was just something so different. I don't know how to describe it. The creature hissed, disappointed, angry, with a serious annoyance that it had snapped.
"Shh, you."
I was still tugging on my holster, and I ran further away, and he suddenly spun the car out of the driveway. He didn't even try to jump me. The road was not straight, curved this way and that. The car disappeared behind the corner in a few seconds. I finally pulled out the gun, put a cartridge in the barrel, but there was nobody there. So I stood there with the TT in my hand. Silence, sunshine, complete desolation, and I was shivering. I calmed down a little bit. I started to think quite calmly. What do you want me to do now? Go back to the command post and tell everything there. Ask to be taken to the medical unit. To tell them that, instead of a chauffeur, some creature was behind the wheel of the goat. Would you take such a story seriously if you were them? Of course not. They'd think the doctor was going mad. It happens to people in war. In short, I stood there for a while and went on, straight to the infirmary. The pistol, however, did not hide. I kept it in my hand with the safety off. But she never saw the creature or the car again. She reached the outskirts of the village without the slightest adventure. I asked the sentry if a goat with a white-haired boy behind the wheel had passed by. It turned out that it had. The sentry, of course, did not stop him. He was not going to the location of the medical unit, but passing by. That's the story. I was a city girl with higher education, from an intelligent family. At home, no one was ever interested in such things. Devilry, mysticism, folklore. No believing grandmothers, no evening stories in the spirit of evenings on a farm near Decanca. Evenings, and it was quite different, classics, literary fiction. And I myself was, of course, a Komsomol member, a hardcore materialist. As someone wrote, brought up by time and country. But it really happened to me, honestly. It was a creature in human form, a werewolf. You know, I was sure then, and I'm sure now. If I'd got in the car with it, I'd have been finished, because it was hunting. I can't explain why, but I know this for a fact. It was hunting people, the lone passerby. That would have been the end of me. I don't know why it didn't jump out of the car, lunge at me. I'm not going to guess. Yes, I read somewhere later, much later, It is so side vision, looking not straight ahead, and you can see the true shape of some evil. That's the popular belief. And it turned out to be right. Did people disappear from the location of the division? In those places? Of course it happened. In war it happens not so rarely and is officially called missing in action, about which a corresponding notice is sent to relatives. There's no telling what. One was taken away by enemy reconnaissance. Another simply deserted, a third stepped on a mine and was blown to pieces. There were always reasonable, familiar explanations. To surmise something like my case, you have to experience it yourself, and fortunately, this is quite rare. I had never heard anything like it from people in my life, no stories of encounters with anything like it. And, in fact, I hadn't told anyone for a long time myself. It's the kind of thing people keep to themselves. There's no proof or evidence, but it happened to me, I swear to you.